No BS Nutrition is still physical distancing, and we're not mad about it.
This is a 1-hour food fight against diet culture and its fake science messages.
Instead, we're passionate about celebrating real wellness.
I'm registered dietitian Hannah McGee.
And I'm neuroscience PhD student Tareq Youssef, and this is No BS Nutrition.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Tareq. How's it going?
I'm still getting used to the whole video thing.
I know, me too. It's kind of weird, but...
I'm also I'm not sure what to wear. I was thinking the other day, I was like, should I be dressing for success on our video podcast?
I know. I mean, today, I couldn't be bothered today. I don't know. I'm just too tired today, but I know it's funny. I feel like every week I look different. So for the people who are watching on YouTube, they're probably like, this girl is like shape-shifting.
Has a very diverse
appearance.
And looks great.
Thank you. But
I also,
because last week when we came on, you were like, your hair. And this week I'm like,
this week it's very, for people who are listening, it's very like going to soccer practice.
Yeah, that's what I look like.
Don't you think?
Yes.
No, but it's like the glamour of, I think going to soccer practice is very glamorous.
I don't know what soccer teams you played on.
None, zero. What was I going to say? Yeah, but I mean, I was like, should I dress for success? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And then I found myself in this like ratty old t-shirt again.
Yeah.
Also, last time, I thought I was going to earn the Nobel Peace Prize for sound engineering because I was like, I figured this all out on my end.
Yeah.
But I hadn't. But this week, it should sound much better from my end. Also, anyway, it's a lot to learn, and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, and the more respect I get for people who do sound engineering. I actually have this like weird thing where I'm so it really irritates me when a TV show has bad audio. You know what I mean? Especially like you go from like normal audio of regular TV show, like maybe they're like using a boom mic or like individual microphones, like lapel mics, and it sounds fine. And then the show cuts to like a confessional where maybe they're just using like the microphone on the camera or something.
Right.
Whenever there's that kind of dissonance, this is the weirdest pet peeve to have, I think, but I have such a pet peeve about it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely isn't something that I pick up on as much. And like,
I don't think anyone
when
cares.
I was editing, when I was editing last week's episode, and you had texted me like upset about the audio, and you were like, "I'm so sorry, it sounds so bad," or you said that you sounded really bad. And then when I was editing, I didn't. The only thing I noticed was like some of the background noise that you pointed out. That you said like you could hear Thomas like come into the room at one point or something like that, and like I did hear that, but I couldn't like pick up on a huge difference between the audio from the week before and then last week's audio.
Wow, I'm glad. Do you remember Vampire Diaries?
I never watched it.
Okay, it was like a CW show. It was like I don't know if there's like diehard fans who listen to this. We have a huge crossover fan base between NoBS Nutrition and Vampire Diaries. It was basically like what's that vampire, the famous one, Twilight. It was like that, but it was a TV show.
Yeah.
Like human girl meets vampires. Boy.
Okay, yeah.
And they had, I don't know if anyone from the production team was listening, but they had the worst lighting of anything I've ever seen in my life. I literally maybe this is more about me. It's definitely more about me. But at some points, I definitely couldn't even make out who the character was on the screen because it was so dark. I think they were trying to be moody, but I was like, where's the lighting budget? Anyway, so
interesting.
Production stuff means a lot to me, and I really I give huge credit to all those people who make that stuff work because it's very difficult.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everyone is still staying home and staying safe as much as you can. We're going on week 6 of like physical and social distancing.
Yeah.
The
time passes by. I'm still here. Every day I'm like, is it Thursday? No.
Right.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's Sunday today, but it really could be any other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird to lose a routine and to gain such a stagnant one.
Right. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is for sure.
It's hard to diversify within the home. Also, like
Totally.
I have a 700 square foot apartment, which is like not bad, but I'm sure it's nice to like have a backyard and nice for like people who have
I
like
know.
5-bedroom
Yeah.
houses, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's so funny. Pat and I were talking yesterday, and we've chatted a few times about how if we were still in our Halifax apartment, which was 575 square feet, like we probably would have been a lot more stir crazy and kind of wanting to kill
Yeah.
each other because we didn't have any,
Sure.
as much space. We really had like a tiny bedroom, and that was basically it. But then Pat was saying, he was like, now, like next time we look for another apartment or look for a house or something, like people are going to be thinking about, well, what if I have to be quarantined? You know what I mean? Like that's going to be something
That's
in
interesting,
people's
yeah.
minds when apartment hunting or like maybe or house hunting or whatever is like, well, if there's ever another pandemic and I have to stay inside for 2 months, like, am I going to want to be in here, or is this enough space or whatever? Yeah.
We don't have a balcony. I'm almost thinking of like just like going to sit in the car with the window rolled down.
I've seen people doing that. Like they just,
Oh, really?
or even just like, yeah, driving to, I don't know, like a parking lot or somewhere that's, there's no one around and just like sitting with the windows down, just enjoying some fresh air.
I guess it's definitely something to consider. Anyway, regardless, I know we both consider ourselves very lucky.
Yes, absolutely.
I know like our town's been doing a really good job. Like there's a lot of really good charities that are helping homeless people, but apparently the conditions in New York are atrocious for
Really?
homelessness right now. Like obviously a huge thing is that people don't have access to food,
Yeah,
which again is like such a privilege to even be talking about nutrition right now.
absolutely.
So I'm very, very lucky that we get to have these conversations.
Yes, I agree.
Maybe if you're ready, I'm gonna go ahead and bang down that gavel. Court is in session. I
Okay.
would love to ask you what your BS of the week is.
All right, let's do it. So my BS of the week is actually, it was sent in by a listener, a friend of the pod, and an Instagram follower. Now, I actually couldn't tell you, maybe you can, but I couldn't tell you who the human behind the account is. But the account that wrote in and requested we cover this topic for BS of the week, and I found this pretty funny, is
I'm getting worried.
Copy the Beagle.
Great. Okay. Is it a question about animal nutrition?
No.
'Cause as little as I know about human nutrition,
So
I definitely
whoever
don't
owns
know.
or whoever runs the dog Instagram account, Copy the Beagle, I'm answering your BS of the week question today.
I hope this isn't rude. I'm gonna look up the account just so I can get a feel.
No,
of
that's
what's
fine. It's
going on
literally
here
a beagle.
while you're
It's a
talking.
dog. And I
Okay.
tried to trace it back to a human and I could not. So maybe if you're listening, Copy's owner, you can write in and tell us who you are.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But anyways, Copy's owner has requested via Instagram that we talk about alkaline water as a BS of the week segment.
Do you know I wrote a blog post about that for. I probably shouldn't even be talking about it, but you know how. I can't even talk about this. I want to like tell a producer like edit this out. We don't have a producer.
Right. I can edit it.
Oh yeah, we are. Yeah. But regardless, suffice to say, this is a great topic. I'm really happy you're bringing it up.
Yeah. So basically, alkaline water is a water that is essentially more alkaline than traditional normal water, standard water. Water traditionally has a pH level, I believe it's 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's pH neutral.
Yeah, it's neutral. And alkaline water is obviously more basic or more alkaline than our traditional drinking water. And the claims around that are that by consuming or drinking things that are more alkaline, you can change the pH of your body, and
I mean,
reverse, if you eat too many acidic foods, you can reverse that acidity that, or neutralize any acidity in your blood or in your body, which, I mean, I hope that just from the sounds of this,
that sounds dangerous.
It sounds like total BS and definitely dangerous. So, I mean, basically, alkaline water kind of runs in line with the alkaline diet, which...
I can't believe we haven't even talked about this
I
yet.
know. The alkaline diet was pretty popular. I don't think it's really that popular now, but I feel like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago it was a big thing. What do you think? Do you agree?
I actually
on that
didn't know there was a
timeline?
whole diet about it, but I'm definitely aware of the water.
Right. Okay. So basically, alkaline water has minerals added to it to make it more alkaline. So things like calcium, magnesium, potassium, really nothing special. And it's just, there's nothing magical about calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Obviously, they're things that we need in our diet for various reasons, but alkalinity,
And things that we're getting from other sources.
Alkalinity is not one of the things that we need it for.
No.
So I guess the premise behind the alkaline diet or alkaline water is that being in an acidic state is bad for some reason. There's claims that by maintaining a more alkaline pH in the body, we can protect against certain diseases like heart disease and cancer. And
people are so creative.
People are so creative, and inflammation.
I
and
wish I had that kind of mindset.
Oh, right? That you could just pull randomly
you can write anything
something
down. You can
so
write
true.
anything down.
Yeah. So, I mean, to keep things short, this is totally false. It's impossible. You cannot change the pH of your body through anything you eat or drink. So anyone that's telling you otherwise, it's BS. It's BS.
I mean, you're much more capable of speaking to this than I am. But even someone who doesn't have a dietetics degree, even I know our stomach literally has buffers in it, which are basically chemicals that are going to maintain the proper pH that your body needs all the time.
Yeah.
So regardless of whatever pH substance you're ingesting, it's going to get canceled out because those buffers are there to keep you in the healthy range of pH.
Totally. And not just our stomachs, but things like our kidneys and our liver, all of those things play a role as well. Just like detoxing, our bodies can do it themselves. It's the same with maintaining the pH that we're meant to maintain. We don't need external beverages or foods to do it for us. So just like a juice cleanse doesn't detox you like people claim, and our bodies do it on our own, alkaline water isn't going to change the pH in your body or in your blood.
Yeah.
It can't.
Even if it could, that claim has no leg to stand on, and you wouldn't be cured of whatever, but it literally can't even do that.
Totally.
So it's a false claim based on it can't even do the job that it's pretending to do.
Well, and what kind of blows my mind is that, like I said, our body's pH is pretty tightly controlled by our kidneys and like you said, that natural buffer system that we have through our lungs and kidneys, like I said. And if these things aren't working, you need to be hospitalized. Your life is at risk. Your health is at a serious risk if those organs aren't working. So to assume or
premium price water isn't going to be the first thing you turn to.
This fancy $8 bottle of water is going to do something that doctors and treatments in hospital would be able to do for you. Is just, it makes no sense whatsoever. So the pH of your food, or the acidity or the alkalinity of the food or things that you drink, is meaningless in terms of its effects on your health.
I think that's a great point, because not only do I want to drive, I just got tingles actually, because what you said is such a good point. The thing I'd love to drive home through all of these messages that we keep coming back to about supplementation and about these kinds of BS things like alkaline water is not only does the product not work, but you 99% of the time don't need the effect that it's purporting to have.
No, you don't need to change the pH in your body.
Yeah, don't change the pH of your body.
The claims that maintaining or having a certain pH prevents certain things like heart disease or aging or whatever it is, there's nothing to back that up. Those claims were, I don't know where they came from.
Again, if it was that easy to be $8 on a shelf, like, we wouldn't have the kinds of diseases that we have now. You know what I mean?
Even like I've worked as a clinical dietitian, and in my clinical training and in my work as well, I've worked in ICUs, and the pH level of the body, or the acidity or alkalinity of the blood, is something that you monitor in critically ill patients. And again, like I said, if those things are off, or the things that regulate those things are off, like, you're in serious trouble, and you need like serious intensive care, not alkaline water.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the wild thing is, like, there's so many of these waters. There's lithium waters, smart waters. There's one called neuro water.
Is it really?
Yeah. It's really tragic, actually.
That is tragic. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So,
I know, and none of them actually do anything.
No.
Other than charge you lots of money for water.
Totally. Yeah. They empty your wallet and give you no health benefits. So, yeah, I mean, that was kind of a short and sweet BS of the week, but I
love that.
I loved it. Thank you, Copy the Beagle, for writing in about that and asking us to touch on it, because it's just crazy to me that, I don't know.
Thank you, Copy the Beagle. Sorry, that's so funny.
Seriously, I thought it was so funny that it was like a dog account that had sent in that
I want more
request.
animal accounts to send in requests.
I know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is a call out to all the
one
animals
thing that I
listening.
thought maybe you might know who the owner was, because when I went to Copy the Beagle's page and then looked at who they follow, they also follow Caitlin, which is Pat's, my partner Pat's sister. So I was like, oh, maybe like
That's
we
really,
know who
are
they
you saying
are.
copy like copy and paste?
Copy, Koppy.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have some mutuals.
Right. So whose dog is this?
Just a beagle boy living in a dog's world.
Yeah.
You know what? If you like the podcast, go ahead and follow Copy the Beagle on Instagram. They've got some great pictures.
Yeah. It's a cute dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, Copy.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod. Really great question. I think it's so wild. Like, maybe I've brought this up before. What is a podcast other than restringing the same narrative? So it's right there.
Right.
But it's very surprising to me to hear of these products sometimes that we bring up on the podcast. More often than not, they're products that maybe you have to go out and search for a little bit harder in order to acquire. You might have to order them online, for example. But things like alkaline water have actually become so mainstream that I'm sure you or I could go to the local grocery store and find an alkaline water, or find a lithium water or a neuro water.
Yeah.
So that really bothers me, because it's so easy to get.
Oh, I know.
It's so easy to get.
Yeah.
Usually I'm like, oh, at least this like thing, like we can talk about it, we can debunk it, and like, people aren't going to run into it at the grocery store. But this one you actually might.
Something, yeah, for sure. I agree. It sucks. It's sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that BS of the week.
I loved it.
It got me riled up, so that counts to me as a successful BS of the week. Check. Now we're going to jump into our main topic for this week, which is a bit of a controversial topic. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's MSG, and we're going to talk about the misconceptions around MSG, or monosodium glutamate, which I think a lot of people know MSG. Again, something we'll talk about further, but as something that's associated with Asian food or Asian takeout or like restaurant food.
It even has conjured. This is like something that's in the literature too, and people might know the term or the phrase, but it's even created the idea of Chinese restaurant syndrome.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And
actually, I've run into a situation before where I was at like it wasn't a Apollo. It was like a dinner or like a lunch or something, and we had it catered by a really great Chinese restaurant. And one person who came to the lunch was like, "Oh, I can't eat MSG. I'm allergic." And I just like very quickly said something like, "Oh, like don't worry about it. Like that's actually like there's more nuance to it than that. Like that's not. I don't
Right.
think you're probably not allergic." I
Right.
was like, "Oh, you should be fine. Those rumors aren't true or whatever." And they got very defensive and very upset at me. So,
Oh gosh, yeah, Tareq, if you tell anyone that they're not allergic to something when they're convinced that they are, yikes.
Yeah, so I learned my lesson there in trying to like convert people on the spot.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully that person tunes in.
Yeah, I hope they're listening. Yeah, so MSG, like we were saying, yeah, there's a lot of controversy around it. A lot of
It's like milk allergy vibes. You know what I mean?
yeah, a lot of
People,
there's
it's something people say without really like. They don't talk to a dietitian. They don't
Yeah.
talk to a doctor.
yeah, something people associate with a lot of negative health outcomes
Effects.
or like
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
bad for you without actually really knowing anything about it. And I'll be honest, I was guilty of that for a long time. Like as a kid, I can specifically remember like driving around with my parents and seeing like Chinese restaurants with like signs in their windows that said no MSG, and then being like, "Mom, like what's MSG?" Like, and then my mom would be like, she didn't really know, but she was like,
Right.
"I don't know, but it's bad for you." Like because
Right, because
that
like
was
that's
just
all
like,
you hear in the news
right.
or something.
That was
Yeah.
just kind of like the common belief is that MSG is bad for you, and so much so that even if like Chinese restaurant owners know that it's not, and it's something that they've been using for years or whatever, because there's this huge misconception around it, they have to eliminate it from their cooking in order to attract customers. Like it's do you know what I mean?
It's really sad. I mean, it's obviously created a bunch of like food and culture related racism.
Mm-hmm.
The people have been in the past and continue to who hold these misconceptions about MSG continue to be prejudiced or discriminatory towards Chinese people, like saying kind of derogatory things about Chinese food, like, "Oh, that makes me sick, like it's terrible," whatever.
Yeah, it's like associating it with lower quality and I agree. It's gross. Just like
it is gross. It actually makes me really sad right now because obviously there's been discrimination and racism targeted towards Asian people, specifically Chinese people, because of the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's been some talk about supporting local Chinese businesses, local Asian businesses, in order to like combat any lack of customers that they've been getting because of maybe an uptick in racism because of misconceptions about coronavirus. And I went to very safely and like from a distance pick up some Chinese food takeout. This restaurant owner had actually very smartly, did I tell you the story already?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Had very smartly pushed all of the tables in the restaurant forward to the front of the restaurant and kind of created a barrier. So then they would just like put the food on the table and then you pick it up. And I just paid with tap. So like there was really, really smart. And it was really sad. The restaurant owner had printed out a bunch of
Oh, you did tell me this.
stuff saying like trying to combat some misconceptions about coronavirus and Chinese people, and like saying like, you know, they're obviously not harbingers of the virus, like they're not spreading it, and they feel, you know, like they're being discriminated against, and they just want everybody, you know, they just want to get along with the people in their neighborhood. And I was really saddened because like this must be a really tough time for a lot of people. I've heard some stories of friends of mine and who are of Asian descent and who have been discriminated against really openly recently, which is really terrible. So like to have a culture that's being so maligned right now, and then like it makes me really sad that people also give like the food a bad rap as well without understanding where misconceptions are coming from. So hopefully today we like we get through to some people and like debunk some myths about MSG.
I hope so too. So maybe we should.
Was that too rambly?
No, not at all.
I just feel like there's a lot of emotion associated with this, and
especially right now.
I'd like to like bring out some truth to the light.
I agree. So maybe we'll just do a little introduction about what MSG is and just kind of give people a bit of a background, and then we'll dive into, kind of the misconceptions around it and research behind it. And so basically MSG, like I said, is monosodium glutamate. So it's a sodium salt of the amino acid glutamate. So last week we gave a little amino acid science lesson. So just a reminder, amino acids are like the building blocks that make up proteins. So if you think about monosodium glutamate, it's essentially a sodium ion bound to the amino acid glutamate. That's what, like if you're looking at the molecule or the chemistry behind it.
Totally.
That's what it is. So
the protein just has another sodium added onto it.
Yeah. So glutamate is one of, like I said, the amino acids in our body. It's actually one of the most abundant amino acids in our body, and it's also found in various plant and animal foods. So some food sources of glutamate, so not monosodium glutamate, but glutamate, are corn, peas, mushrooms, tomatoes, and certain cheeses, I believe. So basically it can be extracted from these foods when they're cooked and used as an ingredient in things like soups and gravy mixes and broths and certain prepared meat products. And then MSG, so monosodium glutamate, is used for similar, but like for seasoning foods.
Yeah, it has like an umami taste.
Exactly. Yeah. It I think what I read is that it doesn't have a taste itself, but it brings out like the umami taste or flavor in what it's added to. I believe that's what I read. And MSG is made by fermenting starch or sugar, essentially from sugar beets, sugar cane, or molasses from corn. So that's a little background. MSG is not the same thing as salt. So MSG is made from water, like I said, sodium and glutamate. And then salt or table salt is sodium chloride. So it's a sodium ion and a chloride ion together.
Salt is just like a chemistry term for things that have chlorides attached to them, I think. So it's like you can have potassium salt, you can have sodium salt, you can have
I think a lot of times there's a bit of a misconception around the difference between sodium and salt. So sodium is just like the single element, right? Na. Right. And then table salt is sodium and chloride. I think people get that a little bit confused. But anyways, that's a little bit of a background. It's used, so like I said, it's considered a flavor enhancing ingredient, used to enhance the flavor of various foods, and it does provide or bring out, like we said, like an umami or a savory taste. I love it. I love like an umami taste, that savory flavor. And that umami taste is the taste of glutamate. That's really what
and glutamate is aside from like being used all over the body to construct proteins, it also acts as it's like a really natural substance in our body. It acts as a neurotransmitter in the central nervous system, for example. It even acts as a neurotransmitter in the retina. So it's found in the body already.
Totally. Exactly. It's naturally occurring in the body and in various foods. It's not It's not a foreign substance. Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. So I didn't realize this, but when I was doing my reading, the umami taste receptor wasn't actually discovered until like 2002.
It's pretty recent, eh?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to me. But so it was established, or umami was established as the 5th basic taste in 2002. So it's really, it's pretty new.
I mean, modern neuroscience is like a lot has happened in a very short amount of time.
Right.
Like with technological advancements, all of a sudden we had like a bunch of things happen in the 19th century, and then like from there just catapulted on. So things have been pretty recent in terms of like understanding things like our sensory systems.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So just like we have taste receptors for like sweet things or salty things or sour things, we have taste receptors for that umami flavor on our tongues, which is cool.
And if people don't have a visual for what MSG really looks like, I mean, you can buy MSG, like comes in a powder form, which is believe most of the time what restaurants use. Some people even have MSG in their homes and they kind of sprinkle it on top of their food as you would table salt or pepper.
Yeah, I think that's not really common knowledge that MSG is like readily available, something you can purchase and add to your own foods. I think, again, people think it's this like scary thing that's added
I don't know what like people have like a visual in their mind of it like being like a spray or like a gloopy like slime. It's just like powdered salt like any other salt.
And it's actually added to a lot of packaged foods as well. So it's added to, you know, a lot of things like chips or canned soups and certain salad dressings. So, you know, like we said, a lot of people associate it strictly with Asian cuisine, but it is in a lot of like packaged foods that you might buy at the grocery store too. It's not.
And I bet some people who think they don't like it actually probably like it because you very likely have had MSG before. Because it's so prevalent.
And you just didn't realize that it was in what you were eating. Yeah, exactly. Right. I agree. So I think, do you think that was a good little introduction?
Yeah, that was a great introduction. Okay. I love that.
Okay.
I have a few little papers here. I don't know if you want me to get into them first or you want to
Well, I mean, your papers are around whether or not it's safe, right?
Mm-hmm,
yeah, I think that's kind of what we were going to dive into next. So let's talk about that.
Well, I just wanted to say, too, before getting into the papers, I've been trying to work extra hard recently to find papers that are like well or highly cited in the nutrition field, in the nutrition literature, and I'm trying to read about what people thought of the papers as well, just to make sure I'm bringing something useful to the table. Because even last time out, just like from our last episode, I was so shocked, honestly, at how many of the papers I came across for collagen, I just didn't have a good gut feeling about and I didn't trust. So this time around I tried to work extra hard to find some really good papers. So hopefully this is some like good, like up to date, still being cited, still being discussed knowledge about MSG. So actually so there's this one paper called Consensus Meeting Monosodium Glutamate and Update. So I'll include all the links as usual. And then there was a little bit of drama about this paper. Ooh. So actually science drama is, I think, the best kind of drama because people get heated with words. And then they basically fight by kind of ripping each other apart by like submitting another paper in retaliation. And they kind of like tattle on them to the journal editor. And they're like, well, I have a letter to the editor about this paper that you published. So I hope if you can entertain me, I'm going to walk you through some drama about MSG.
Let's hear it.
Okay. So in 2007, there was a paper that was published where a bunch of scientists talked about glutamate intake. So basically also like intake of MSG was something that they considered.
Yeah.
And they basically found that glutamate salt, or monosodium glutamate, MSG, was generally, quote, harmless for the whole population as a food additive. So that was kind of their big conclusion.
Sure.
They did suggest that there needs to be more work to understand maybe how high doses of MSG might affect people, high doses of glutamate intake, specifically like whether they might pass to a fetus, for example. And of course, we're always worried about how things are going to affect in development, right?
Yeah.
Affect the body in development. Or maybe how glutamate that's added to our bodies as an additive, like through MSG, might pass through to the brain through what's called the blood-brain barrier. I don't know if we've talked about the blood-brain barrier on the podcast. I don't think we have. Very short. The blood-brain barrier is just the term for any sort of passage between the rest of our circulatory system, our bloodstream, and what gets through to the brain. So in between there's a lot of specialized cells that hang around the blood vessels and kind of keep bad stuff out and let good stuff in. Yep. That's really I'm dumbing it down for myself too, because I'm not an expert in blood-brain barrier, obviously. But so there's some question about whether or not a brain injury, like maybe let's say a concussion or a stroke or something like that, might decrease the integrity of the blood-brain barrier and maybe might let substances in that maybe shouldn't be in there, or maybe shouldn't be in there in excess. So the consensus from the paper was that we need to understand more how added glutamate might affect the brain through an injured blood-brain barrier. So they even mentioned how, something interesting that I didn't think about, mentioned that how in cases of decreased appetite, like elderly people or sick people, food can be made palatable with something like an additive like MSG. So like it can even get people who aren't eating to eat, which is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So then, here's where the drama starts. A year later, Dr. Hermanussen from the University of Kiel, Germany, went absolutely off, dragged them through the mud, wrote a letter to the editor of the journal of the original paper. It was total drama. The first line is, "Sir, with irritation, I took notice of the consensus meeting paper, Monosodium Glutamate, and update." I just like, I can't even imagine. It was so cool reading this. Okay, so obviously I'll include all that below. Very fun.
Yeah.
Very fun reading it. So this letter to the editor in retaliation to the consensus meeting paper mentioned that there were a couple typos in the original paper that this author was mad about, which rightly so. That, you know, we want to be as accurate as possible when we're disseminating scientific knowledge. And they were actually typos that were pretty important because they were related to the maximum safe intake that the consensus meeting had reached. So they were pretty important typos. And in this letter to the editor, the author cites a bunch of studies, including their own work, which looked into MSG or glutamate dose effects on the body. So this author's own study that they cited in this letter to the editor was looking at high MSG diet effect on rats. So this was one thing that they took. You know, this author was kind of saying, like, there shouldn't be a consensus on MSG because actually, well, like the original paper said, we need to know more about how high doses affect the body.
Right.
So, and I guess they thought that high doses affect the body so strongly that we actually can't reach a consensus yet.
Okay.
So this study, one of the studies that was referenced in the letter to the editor in retaliation to the original one, saw that there were changes in hormone levels. Specifically saw lower than normal growth hormone levels, which, you know, it's a pretty important thing to worry about if our natural hormone levels are changing. Of course, this was in rats. Lower than normal growth hormone levels with high MSG diet. So their definition of a high MSG diet was 5 grams of MSG per day. So for an average rats at adulthood are around like 300 grams. I know that from personal experience. So for around an adult rat, 5 grams of MSG is about 1.6% of their body weight. So I decided to do some math, and I'm fully expecting my Nobel Peace Prize to come in the mail because I really didn't want to do math at this point in time when I was doing it, but I decided to do some math. 1.6% of body weight is around 3.2 pounds of MSG for a 200-pound person. Okay, just as comparison.
Whoa.
Maybe I shouldn't be drawing, it's not a perfect comparison for me to make, like, to convert dosages between a rat and a human. Of course, maybe effects would happen differently.
Yeah, for sure.
But suffice to say, that high MSG diet dose was really, really high, much higher than an individual would consume, right?
Totally.
And another study that was cited in this paper in retaliation saw that for 4 grams per kilogram of a dose in a rat, there were changed glutamate levels in some part of the brain. So presumably, the glutamate that was ingested through the digestive system passed through the blood-brain barrier, which is something that was an original concern of some of the scientists, and elevated the glutamate levels in parts of the brain. So of course, I mean, my understanding of that from my studies of sensory systems that use glutamate is that this could be driving neurotransmitter receptors that could be affecting, you know, function of the brain in various different ways. Glutamate is used in various regions of the brain for various functions. So you'd have altered, you know, brain function. Something to definitely take caution of.
Right.
But this 4 grams per kilogram dose in a rat, again, is around 360 grams for a 200-pound person. So less than the dosage before, but that's still, it's around 1 pound per person.
That's a lot.
If that person was 200 pounds.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of MSG to ingest. So I think, anyway, so then this caused me to wonder, okay, what is an average amount of MSG that somebody would consume.
Right.
Okay, so far we found that there's some evidence in studies from rats that MSG at dosages which reach up to and over 1 pound per person might be harmful. Okay, so how much MSG are we ingesting maybe in a meal from a restaurant? So usually it's about a half a teaspoon of MSG seasoning per pound of food that's going to end up serving around 4 to 6 people.
Oh my
is what
God.
I saw from looking stuff up from recipes and so on. So we're ingesting way less than the recommended servings. So what happened was, after all of this drama, after this letter to the editor, after saying, "Sir, with irritation, I took notice of the consensus meeting paper," the original consensus meeting paper was revised. So the original scientists actually went back, revised the original paper, and made a bunch of corrections, including getting rid of some of those typos, those errors. And their final statement, which is, I guess, up to date as of then, this was a while ago, like over 10 years ago, but still is one of the most cited papers on this topic, still very prevalent in the literature. So their final decision was it's safe up to 6 grams per kilogram in humans. So that's just over 1 pound for a 200-pound person, which is still an unrealistically high dose for consumption.
If you think about like how much salt, like obviously it's not the same as MSG, but if you think about how much salt you add to things, which, you know, or any spice or seasoning, it's like to like say a soup, you might add a teaspoon of salt that serves like 8 people or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And so it's not, no one out here is consuming almost a pound of MSG. Like, I think
I don't think
anything,
you could.
No, and I think anything, obviously we know that like more than the recommendations for sodium are 1,500.
Way lower than that.
Yeah, like the maximum is like 2,300 milligrams a day. So that's like nowhere near like a pound. So,
it's a lot.
Right? We know that eating a lot of anything is bad. So obviously eating pounds of MSG probably isn't going to result in great health outcomes, just like anything else.
So I just very quickly, if you don't mind, I feel like I talked for too long, but just because I thought that paper was kind of a very general overview, I did find, and it was quite a long paper, but I have it summarized really short.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind me going through it. No. I wanted to talk about a paper called "Does Monosodium Glutamate Really Cause Headache? A Systematic Review of Human Studies."
That's one of the claims, is that it causes headaches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest one, is that monosodium MSG causes headaches. So from reading this paper, it was really interesting. So I will say, maybe the original paper that I just talked about, the consensus paper that said it was safe up to 6 grams per kilogram in humans, did say like all these side effects that people are listing, headache, allergy, etc., like they kind of debunked that, and which is where their number of 6 grams per kilogram of safety came in.
Okay.
But then I wanted to find something that was more specifically targeting one of the side effects. So I picked this headache paper because it seemed really well cited in the literature. People were really talking about it. So an interesting thing that the authors mentioned in the paper is that it's kind of a tough thing to study blindly. So if you think about it, MSG has a flavor. So at certain high doses, the study participant is maybe going to be able to pick up on the flavor. So you might expect an effect and therefore unconsciously bias yourself in declaring that you received a bad effect when maybe you didn't have one.
Yep. I don't know if we've talked about that before, sorry, but like a lot of times, even with like digestive issues, like if you think that you don't digest something well, or you think that gluten gives you cramps or like a stomach ache, you almost like convince yourself into feeling unwell when you
it's
eat
like
something.
The placebo effect in the opposite
exactly.
way. Right?
Yeah. I feel like
the
we've
mind
probably
is obviously
talked about
very
that
powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we've talked about placebo, but you're right. We haven't really talked about it going in the other direction where like you convince yourself to feel worse.
Yeah.
When you often maybe you don't mean to, but it's because we have these like preconceived notions about how things affect
and like
our body.
anxieties and like, exactly.
Totally. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
There's also the other thing of like at high doses where we're finally going to be reaching an effect. So the science so far has told us that at small doses, there's no harmful effect of MSG. So if we're going to push the limits and really test for the effects of a high dose, you're going to be experiencing like a really concentrated and strong, unpleasant taste.
Yeah.
That's going to cause some upset stomach likely. And that's going to maybe affect your opinion of whether or not you have a headache.
Yeah.
Even worse is that just being able to taste the difference between an MSG solution or a control solution, like if it's just in water, like I mentioned before, that goes without saying, you might convince yourself of a negative outcome where there wasn't one. So anyway, it's really interesting. So virtually all of the studies found no effect of MSG on headache, the studies that were systematically reviewed in this paper.
Okay.
Or even on GI distress. So even more than that, they cite that MSG ingestion with food rather than on its own has very little impact on circulating levels of glutamate in the bloodstream.
Wow.
So some of the studies went even further to detect whether or not glutamate is like biochemically more available in the bloodstream after ingesting MSG as an additive. And it seems that with food, it's likely being digested or broken down further. Like it's not overwhelming your system with glutamate that wasn't already, naturally occurring from your diet and from whatever processes.
Yeah.
It seems like if there ever was a negative effect, like GI unpleasantness or a reported headache, even though all of those reports are really hard to believe, it was at unreasonably high doses and when MSG was ingested without food, whether it was in a capsule or dissolved in water in some of these studies. And obviously you can probably speak to how like with digestion, it's likely easier. You're going to like break things down and they're not going to enter the bloodstream in the same way.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, it wouldn't enter the bloodstream as quickly. So, that might have
that's
an effect.
A huge part of it.
Well, and like that's like if you think about sugar, like or carbohydrates, like if you just eat like a bunch of candy at once, compared to the same amount of carbohydrates or sugar, like paired with fat and protein or whatever, like a meal, those things are going to get absorbed into your bloodstream a lot slower the carbohydrates would, and that would absolutely affect how you felt. If you might not necessarily get that huge like sugar rush or feel a big crash an hour later because it didn't all rush into your bloodstream at once. So there's the same thing with taking like a very concentrated dose of MSG or of salt or something like that. I think whether you took it by itself or in a meal or with food would absolutely kind of make a difference.
I'll just really quickly finally add, from what I saw, there is no evidence to suggest that there are true allergies. I read something like if there was such a thing, like it's such a small percentage of people and it's probably not a true MSG allergy.
Yeah,
it's like
I read that related as well. It might be like some people, I think what I've read is that some people may have like sensitivity to glutamate containing
excess
foods
glutamate for whatever underlying.
But that's just like some people have sensitivities to certain food. You know what I mean? It's not MSG is bad. Do you know? It's okay. Some people might be sensitive, just like some people might be sensitive to something else. And food sensitivities are really, they're not.
I mean, we've covered how complex it can be with
great definition of sensitivities.
The dairy allergies.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's not something that's defined, or there's not like a lot of parameters around what constitutes a sensitivity as
and it's really hard to
compared
measure.
To allergies. Yeah, exactly. So
because the symptoms are so like diverse and they vary in intensity.
Yeah, that's kind of what I read.
I mean, that's my whole thing. Sorry, I feel like I talked for too long.
No, it was great.
Thank you.
One thing that maybe we should have, I guess, talked about before, but I mean, where the myth around MSG came from.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's kind of one thing I had written down that I forgot to mention. But it's kind of weird how this entire misconception came about. But did you read anything about it?
No, that's
Okay.
I know. I'm really curious.
So basically, in 1968, a doctor wrote a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this letter described the author's personal account of symptoms that he experienced after eating at a Chinese restaurant. So some of the symptoms that he experienced, he said, were weakness, palpitations, and numbness. And in the letter, he mentioned that the symptoms may have been due to a number of ingredients in the Chinese food that he ate. So it could have been sodium, it could have been alcohol from the cooking wine, or it could have been MSG. So that's where it came from. Like just this
Wow.
potential for MSG to have caused those symptoms.
And then it just catapulted from
and
there.
it catapulted from there. And I read in a blog post written by another dietitian that 1968, and I didn't really realize this, but 1968 was also a time where a lot of things relating to Asian culture were considered like possibly unclean or exotic, and which is obviously, again, like we kind of talked about at the start, it's kind of a gross, untrue belief that we know better now, but I think at the time that kind of fueled like that MSG, those beliefs around MSG, and the idea that it was bad for you or unclean or whatever for some reason.
Wow. I mean, Asian discrimination in the West was like, obviously it hasn't stopped, but something I think of is like the portrayals of yellowface in the movie industry, like even in Breakfast with Tiffany, which like, have you ever watched that movie?
No.
It's like, what a classic film.
Wait,
right? Like so many people.
Is it Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Oh, whoops. Is it? Oh, it's at, not Breakfast with Tiffany. The main character, Tiffany. Breakfast at Tiffany's, the landlord character is a North American actor in yellowface in the film.
Really?
Like,
I didn't know
you're
that.
right. I guess that it makes sense now that you say it. Like, 50 odd years ago, like that sentiment was very strong, and maybe it can be now as well, obviously, but it was much more mainstream, maybe.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense how that can be that kind of like racism can be picked up and like whatever proliferated so quickly, and then become this huge phenomena that, to the extent that restaurants are advertising that they're not using like a benign food additive, like you were saying, like putting up the sign in the window saying no MSG.
Yeah. Just like sad that, knowing that it's been something, like I said, they've been using for years. They have to put up this sign and not use it in their cooking because there's this racist like misconception around it. Yeah.
Really great. There was a recent Bon Appetit video with Claire Saffitz, and she used MSG in one of the recipes and was like, it's fine, like everything, no, that's true. Like, it was great to see something like that.
Yeah.
In one of those videos, like, they get millions of views on their videos, so a lot of people would have seen that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that I didn't see it, but that's good. So let me just see here. I'm just kind of going through the rest of my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to say.
Think of what copy might want to hear.
Copy. I guess I looked at Health Canada and their recommendations, and they basically, said in general the use of MSG is not a health hazard to consumers. The safety's been reviewed, and that's, they see it as something that's safe to consume. They did mention that some individuals, may exhibit that sensitivity reaction that people claim, and they just kind of list off some symptoms which are similar to what we've talked about, like headache, nausea, but these things aren't they've never seemed to be like super serious, or they're temporary. So, and
also it's all been correlative stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No reputable study, as far as I've seen, has made a really distinct link between the two.
Right. No concrete evidence. It's basically people consuming it and saying
Anecdotal
oh,
stuff.
I don't feel well. Yeah. Which could be maybe you ate too much, or like maybe there's so many different things that could play a role. So yeah, and just to kind of drive home, a lot of people believe, like we said, that MSG like solely comes from Asian cuisine, which is not true. It's in a lot of different things, and you've probably, even if you've never had Chinese food, like you've probably consumed MSG before, and you were probably fine. But also, a lot of people think that MSG is the only source of glutamates, which again we've covered, and that's not true. It's found in a lot of foods. So again, if you were like under the belief that you couldn't have MSG in Chinese food because you're sensitive to the glutamates, well, like if you've eaten tomatoes or like Parmesan cheese or whatever, like you've also consumed glutamates. And
if you've been alive this whole time, you've had glutamate in your body.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much misconception, and again, it's similar to, like you said, kind of the dairy sensitivity thing, or if you haven't listened to our episode on milk allergies and lactose intolerance, you should listen. But yeah, I think a lot of times people just get convinced that, I don't know, they find out that there's something in something and they're allergic to that. But then they don't realize that there's like a ton of other foods they've been consuming that contain this substance as well.
That's such a good point.
So, oh yeah, and then one other thing that I read, let me see. This is from Health Canada. The Federation of American Societies of Experimental Biology, in its report on adverse reactions to MSG, concluded that there is no difference in the physiological response to synthesized and natural glutamates. So again, whether it's like MSG that's been created from corn or whatever, like they've synthesized it themselves, or it was naturally occurring glutamates in tomatoes or what have you, there's no difference in the physiological response.
It works the same way in your body.
Exactly. Yeah. So whether you eat it from tomatoes or corn or from Chinese food takeout or like Doritos, it would affect you the same way. So just keep that in mind if you've been convinced, I guess, that Chinese food makes you sick because of the MSGs or something like that.
There's even songs, like there's pop songs. What's that? I mean, maybe we won't say, but like that idea is so prevalent that Chinese food makes people ill. Like, yeah. And, you know, there's some, I'm sure people can say this maybe about some of their towns as well, maybe not everybody, but I know locally some of the Chinese restaurants here like have had bad raps in the past that I've really enjoyed and have had really positive experiences with. And I always feel like I have to like tell the people I'm with, like, you shouldn't be saying that. Like, have you really tried their food? Or like, what did you eat when you were there? Like, how much did you eat? Like, why were you sick the next day? Was it also because you were drinking copious amounts at the same time?
Yeah, totally. You know, could be. There's so many, variables. There's always variables that people don't account for. Okay. One last thing. So there are actually, one thing I wanted to mention is that, again, with all of these misconceptions, MSG is actually quite a bit lower in sodium than table salt. So some people do use it as a way to add flavor with less sodium. So, you know, if you're someone that needs to, for some reason, you know, pay closer attention to your sodium intake, it does have 2/3 less sodium than table salt. So that's something that some people use it for.
That's a hot nutrition tip.
Yeah.
I want to add a sound effect like bow bow bow.
So you can add MSG to things to add flavor or bring out flavors with less sodium, which I think is kind of important for some people.
If you're watching your blood sodium levels, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is huge.
Thank
I know.
you, Hannah. I love that. That's great.
I definitely think that's something people don't know. Like, and even for a long time. I've never heard that, but yeah. Again, with like the I don't know, all the misconceptions, and just growing up, I knew nothing about MSG. And like I said, like driving in the car one day with my parents and just getting the impression from them when I asked them what MSG was, like that it was something that was bad and should be limited. I think for a long time, I don't know where I got this idea, but I associate, maybe because it has sodium in the name, but I associated MSG with like really high salt content. Yeah, and it's actually 2/3 less sodium than table salt. So who knew?
Wow. Like per weight.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah, me too. That was fun to talk about. I hope that you guys learned something listening. I mean, we definitely learned when we looked into this and discussed it together. It feels really good to kind of clear up misconceptions and
totally. There's so many open questions out there about like for me, especially about the topics we cover, that like doing the research behind it and then getting to talk to you really like satisfies that urge, that curiosity of like things that I just didn't know.
Yeah. So that's MSG. Maybe Tareq, why don't you tell me? Let's jump into what's been tasty this week for you.
So mine is a little bit cheesy, but I had a couple things, but my tasty this week is honestly you and the podcast, because regardless of how many things have been so up in the air lately, like I have had this like one thing to look forward to and one thing to like keep me, you know, even if I don't feel productive, I'm like, I should work on the podcast. Like, I should do some research and figure this out. And it's always like really like laid back, relaxed research. So without getting too teary eyed, I will say I really appreciate you. And this is my tasty of the week.
I love that. I really appreciate you too. And I agree. It's definitely, this is something that I look forward to every week for many reasons. But obviously, you know, a big one is just getting to sit down and talk with you for an hour uninterrupted and just like getting to chat and catch up.
I have to Thomas, you have to go in the other room. I'm busy.
See, I was like, Pat, stay upstairs. It's nice to have for sure. And also, I mean, I obviously love talking about nutrition and sharing nutrition knowledge with people and accurate nutrition information. So I agree. This is something I really, really appreciate.
I hope this is an episode that people will share.
Please share it with, I don't know, maybe someone you've had a conversation about MSG with, and, you know, who
a
maybe
lot of people
has
hold this belief.
Yeah, exactly. So share this one. Yeah, let people know what the truth about MSG is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe can I ask you what's been tasty for you?
Of course. Yeah, so mine is actually, funny enough, mine is not a food-related one this week either. What's been tasty to me this week is actually, since we did our episode about the quarantine 15 and canceling it, I've seen like a lot of other people like speaking out about it and just, you know, talking about why it's harmful to use language like that. No, I don't. I mean, I'm not saying
kidding.
that. I don't think
I know you're not.
People who listen to the podcast are not speaking out of it. I think it's just, I'm just happy to see that. I mean, obviously there's so much more work to do, but that a lot of people are starting to realize the harms of diet culture and language, you know, even joking about gaining weight during quarantine and how that can be harmful and what that perpetuates. And so yeah, I saw a lot of people, not necessarily just dietitians, but a lot of dietitians, but also just people that I follow on social media sharing posts and talking about it. And yeah, it was really impressive to me because I guess for not a long time. I mean, I've really only kind of learned about the non-diet side of nutrition and health and wellness in the last few years. But even when I started learning about it, I felt very much like an outcast in just even in the nutrition world, like kind of talking about intuitive eating and why certain diet messages are harmful. And now it I don't know, it seems like a lot more people are getting on board, and
that's great.
It's really great to see. Yeah. So that's what's been tasty for me this week, is just seeing all the other people posting about, you know, why you shouldn't be worried about gaining weight right now, and how there are obviously more important things to worry about. And, you know, if, you know, like we posted on Instagram, if, you know, we come out of this a few pounds heavier, we should consider ourselves the lucky ones. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People are starving. People are
starving. People are dying. I don't want to, now I'm like putting a dark,
no, but it's okay. It's like the reality. We can just like feel empowered to like, you know, keep our priorities in check.
Exactly.
And understand that we shouldn't be feeding into fat phobia.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Okay, wow, that one flew by. I can't believe that that episode's over already.
I think we did a good job too. I think we kept to time pretty well.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we didn't even need to reel ourselves back in.
No, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. Subscribe to the podcast on whatever you listen to. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter. And please share this.
Share this episode. Share the podcast with your friends. Share it with someone who you think might need to hear it.
If you have a family member who works in the food industry and would absolutely love to sponsor the living life out of us, we'd welcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And don't forget to leave us a rating and review. I don't know if you said that, but if you didn't,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Please do. And send in some suggestions. Thanks, Copy.
Okay, thanks, Copy. Shout out to you.
Good dog. Good dog, Copy.
Oh my God.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Oh, yeah. Bye, Roxanne.
Bye, Roxanne.